No one wanted the house my grandmother left behind. But I went in and found a surprise in the basement. Jennifer Miller watched as her relatives hurried out of the lawyer's office, all refusing the old house in Greenwich Village that her grandmother Margaret had left to the family. Cousins, uncles, and even her own sister shook their heads when Dr. Richard mentioned the property. It was then that the lawyer looked directly at her and asked if she would accept the inheritance everyone else had rejected. Jennifer didn't hesitate. She took the rusty keys, determined to understand why everyone was running from the house where she had spent the best years of her childhood. "You don't know what you're missing," she murmured to herself as she watched her relatives disappear down the hallway. Dr. Richard adjusted his glasses and sighed. "Your grandmother always said you'd be the only one to understand the value of that place. Why are the others so afraid of the house?" Jennifer asked, twirling the heavy keys between her fingers. "Old stories, my dear. Your family drifted apart after that terrible fight 20 years ago. Since then, no one wanted anything to do with Mrs. Margaret." Jennifer vaguely remembered the argument that had torn the family apart. She was only 15 when it happened, but she could still recall the shouting, the accusations, and the silence that followed. Her grandmother had stayed alone in that house, receiving only her occasional visits. The next day, Jennifer drove to the street where she had grown up. The two-story house still had its faded blue facade, with the wooden windows her grandmother had always painted white. The iron gate creaked just like it used to, and the garden was overgrown with weeds. When she opened the front door, the familiar scent enveloped her, roses mixed with mothballs, exactly as she remembered. Everything was still in place. The crocheted armchair in the living room, the dining table with 6 chairs, the yellowed portraits on the walls. Jennifer walked through the rooms, running her fingers over the furniture. The kitchen still held the spices her grandmother had used, and in the main bedroom, the bed was made as if waiting for someone. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. It was when she decided to explore the basement, a place she hadn't visited since childhood, that she found something unexpected. She descended the creaky wooden stairs, expecting to find the damp storage space full of knickknacks she remembered. But what she saw left her speechless. The basement had been transformed into a pristine sewing atelier. Dress forms stood in a row, displaying wedding gowns in various stages of completion, all unfinished. Vintage but well-maintained sewing machines sat on organized work tables. Rolls of white fabric, lace, and tulle filled shelves all the way to the ceiling. Jennifer counted over 30 dresses. Each had a small tag with a name and date. She approached the first one. Deborah Williams, March 1985. The dress was nearly done, missing only the hem and a few finishing touches. The next read, Susan Johnson, September 1990. This one was also incomplete, with sleeves left unstitched. As she moved between the mannequins, Jennifer realized all the dresses had been deliberately left unfinished. Her grandmother had always said she hated weddings, ever since her grandfather Robert abandoned her while she was pregnant over 50 years ago. So why would she have an atelier full of wedding gowns? On a corner table, she found a worn leather folder. Inside were newspaper clippings, carefully organized by date. The headlines made her swallow hard. Bride runs away at altar in New York City. Woman disappears on wedding eve. Family searches for missing bride. Each clipping showed a different woman, but they all had one thing in common. The names on the dress tags matched exactly the names in the newspapers. Deborah Williams, who was supposed to get married in March 1985, had run away 3 days before the ceremony. Susan Johnson vanished on the morning of her wedding in September 1990. Jennifer felt a shiver run down her spine. What did her grandmother have to do with these women who fled? Why had she kept their dresses? And more importantly, why were none of them finished? She kept rummaging through the folder and found over 40 similar clippings, all about women from the Greenwich Village area and nearby neighborhoods. The dates spanned the last 40 years, always following the same pattern. Brides who mysteriously disappeared. A noise at the basement door made her jump. She turned quickly and saw a gray-haired woman carefully descending the stairs. "Sorry to startle you, dear. I'm Dorothy. your grandmother's neighbor for over 30 years. Mrs. Dorothy? Jennifer vaguely remembered the woman. How did you get in? Margaret gave me a key many years ago. I come here every week to clean and tend to the plants. I knew you'd come one day. The woman looked at the dresses with a melancholic smile. I imagine you're wondering about all this. Do you know what happened to these women? Why did my grandmother keep their dresses? Dorothy walked over to one of the mannequins and gently smoothed the fabric of an unfinished dress. Your grandmother saved each of these young women's lives. Saved them? How? Margaret had a special gift for sensing when a woman was being forced into marriage against her will. Arranged marriages, violent fiancés, families pressuring them. She pretended there were delays in the sewing to give the girls time to reconsider. Jennifer's legs weakened. She sat on a nearby stool. But she said she hated weddings. And she truly did. That's why she helped others avoid what she went through. Every unfinished dress represents a woman who found the courage to start over, far from an unhappy future. Dorothy picked up a small wooden box hidden behind rolls of fabric. She kept their thank you letters here. She said you'd understand everything one day. Jennifer opened the box with trembling hands. Dozens of handwritten letters filled the inside. She picked one at random. Dear Margaret, I can never thank you enough. You gave me the courage to run from that man who beat me. Today, I'm a teacher and have a beautiful daughter. Thank you for saving our lives, Deborah. She read another. Dear Margaret, it's been 5 years since I fled my arranged marriage. My parents wanted to marry me off to a 60-year-old man for money. Now I run my own business and am happy. The unfinished dress changed my life. Susan. One after another, the letters revealed stories of women who escaped terrible fates thanks to her grandmother's subtle intervention. Jennifer cried as she read each thank you, each account of a life transformed. How did she do it? She asked through tears. Margaret was very clever. She'd agree to make the dress, pick up on small signs and set tight deadlines. When she sensed the bride was suffering, she'd create problems. Fabric that didn't arrive, a broken sewing machine, measurements that didn't fit. Meanwhile, she'd talk to the girls, earn their trust, and show them other possibilities. And they just disappeared. Margaret had a network of friends in other cities, seamstresses, shopkeepers, teachers. They helped the girls start over far away, with new papers, jobs, and homes. It was like a secret women's protection group. Jennifer stayed silent, absorbing the revelation. Her grandmother, whom the family had seen as a bitter, reclusive woman, had spent decades saving others from the same suffering she'd endured. Why did the family distance themselves from her? What happened 20 years ago? Dorothy hesitated before answering. Your cousin Ashley was about to get married. Margaret tried to warn her about the groom, but the family thought she was being nosy and spiteful. They accused her of trying to ruin the girl's happiness out of envy. And did the wedding happen? It did. Ashley endured 5 years of beatings before managing to separate. When she came back asking for help, Margaret took her in without saying, "I told you so." But the damage was done. The family never apologized. Jennifer remembered her cousin, who had indeed separated years later under mysterious circumstances. No one talked about it, but she'd always suspected violence was involved. She continued exploring the atelier and found in a locked drawer a letter with her own name. Her hands trembled as she recognized her grandmother's handwriting. My dear Jennifer, if you're reading this, it means you've discovered my secret. Forgive me for not telling you while I was alive, but I knew you'd understand when the time came. You were always special, different from the rest of the family. You had compassion for others since you were little. Remember when you brought home that injured kitten and nursed it back to health? That's how I felt about these women. I couldn't watch them suffer and do nothing. I know some in the family thought I was cruel, but I'd rather carry that reputation than see a woman destroyed by a forced marriage. Use this place as you wish, but remember, there's always someone in need of help even when they don't ask. Your loving grandmother, Margaret. Tears streamed down Jennifer's face. She clutched the letter to her chest, feeling her grandmother's loving presence filling the room. She spoke of you until the end. Dorothy said, resting a hand on Jennifer's shoulder. She said you were the only one in the family who inherited your grandfather, Robert's big heart. My grandfather? But didn't he abandon her? That's another story your family made up. Robert was a tailor and also helped people. He left on a trip to rescue a woman being hunted by her abusive husband, but had an accident on the road and never returned. Margaret waited for years, until she learned he died trying to save someone. Jennifer felt the world spin. Everything she knew about her family was wrong. Her grandmother wasn't a bitter woman, abandoned by her husband, but a widow, honoring his memory by continuing his work. Is there any proof of this? Dorothy pointed to an old chest in the corner of the atelier. Margaret kept the letters Robert wrote during his trips, and his death certificate. Jennifer opened the chest and found bundles of yellowed letters. In the first one she read, Robert described helping a woman named Rachel escape her abusive husband. He spoke fondly of Margaret and promised to return soon to care for the baby they were expecting. The last letter, dated 3 days before her birth, said, "My dearest Margaret, Rachel is safe now, but we've learned her husband hired men to follow us. I'll take a different route home for our safety. If anything happens to me, keep up the work. There are so many women who need help. Kiss our daughter for me, I love you." The death certificate confirmed it. Robert Miller had been found on a back road after an accident, carrying fake documents to protect Rachel's identity. He died a hero, not a coward. Why did my grandmother never tell the truth? Who would have believed her? In the 50s, a woman who left her husband was considered trash. Margaret chose to bear the shame of being abandoned rather than tarnish Robert's memory or expose his work. She kept helping in silence. Jennifer ran her hands over the dresses, seeing them now in a new light. Each piece represented a life saved, a story of courage. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, in the following days, Jennifer returned daily to the atelier. Dorothy accompanied her, sharing stories about each dress. There were shocking cases. 15-year-old girls forced to marry 50-year-old men, women threatened by their own fathers, young girls sold to settle family debts. "How did you manage to get fake documents?" Jennifer asked, amazed by the organization of the operation. Margaret had contacts in registry offices in other cities, clerks who also believed in the cause. They arranged birth certificates under new names or transferred documents of people who had died without family. And the families never found out. Some suspected, but they had no proof. Margaret was very careful. She waited months between each case, changed methods, never followed a fixed pattern. Jennifer imagined her grandmother orchestrating it all, planning every detail to save women she barely knew. The courage and dedication left her in awe. During the week, she received several calls from relatives asking when she'd sell the house. Her cousin Brian was particularly insistent. "Jennifer, that house isn't worth anything. The neighborhood is full of problems. The structure is old. Just take a low offer and be done with this headache." "I'm not selling, Brian." "Don't be stubborn. You have a daughter to support. You need the money." "I don't need your advice." Brian grew irritated. "You're acting just like the old lady, stubborn and clueless. That house only brings trouble for the family." "What trouble?" "Don't you remember the gossip? Neighbors said Mrs. Margaret practiced witchcraft, that she welcomed strange women in the middle of the night. She tarnished the whole family's name." Jennifer hung up, finally understanding the real reason her relatives avoided the house. It wasn't fear or superstition, it was shame. Shame over a woman who had the courage to act when they chose to look away. On Thursday, while organizing the dresses, she heard footsteps upstairs. She hurried up and found her 17-year-old daughter Emma rummaging through the rooms. "What are you doing here?" Jennifer asked, trying to hide her irritation. "I came to see why you've been gone for a whole week. I thought you were sick or something." Emma had her brown hair tied in a ponytail and wore a simple beige blouse, much like the ones Jennifer wore as a teenager. Despite their physical resemblance, their personalities were very different. "I'm fine, just sorting through your great-grandmother's things." "Mom, you're acting weird. You leave in the morning, come back at night, don't talk about anything. What's in this house that's so important?" Jennifer hesitated. How could she explain such a secret to a teenager? It's complicated, Emma. Everything's complicated for you. You never tell me anything important. That's not true. Yes, it is. You treat me like a child. But when I need you, you're always busy with other things, just like you are now. The argument escalated quickly. Emma accused her mother of being obsessed with the house and neglecting the family. Jennifer defended herself, saying she was uncovering important things about their roots. What does it matter? Great-grandma is dead. Why can't you let the past go and focus on the present? Because the past explains who we are. I don't care, I want a mother who's here, not a family historian. Emma stormed out, slamming the door, leaving Jennifer alone and shaken. Was she really neglecting her daughter because of her discovery about her grandmother? That night, she called Dorothy for advice. How did your grandmother balance helping others and taking care of her own family? Margaret wasn't that lucky, dear. Your mother always rejected you because of the gossip. She died without really knowing her grandchildren. That's why she left everything to you. She knew you'd understand the value of her work. But what if I'm making the same mistake, losing my daughter because of this? Maybe it's time to include Emma in the story. Margaret always said each generation has to choose whether to continue the work or not. It can't be forced. On Saturday, Jennifer decided to take Emma to the atelier. The teenager came down the creaky stairs, complaining about the musty smell, but fell silent when she saw the dresses. What is all this? Jennifer took a deep breath and began telling the whole story, from discovering the dresses to the thank you letters. Emma listened quietly, gently touching the fabrics and reading some of the newspaper clippings. Did our great-grandmother really do all this? She did, and your great-grandfather too. It was a family tradition to help women in need. Emma picked up one of the thank you letters and read it aloud. Mrs. Margaret, today, my daughter graduated from medical school. She exists because you gave me the courage to flee a marriage with a man who beat me when I was pregnant. Thank you for saving 2 lives. Emma looked at her mother with tears in her eyes. Is this real? It's real. Every dress, every letter, every story. Emma walked between the mannequins, taking it all in. Why did the family never tell us about this? Because they were ashamed. They'd rather believe your great-grandmother was a bad woman than accept she had the courage to do what they wouldn't. And now, what's going to happen to all this? I don't know. I'm still deciding. Emma was silent for a few minutes, examining the dresses. Mom, there are still women who need help, right? There are. So many. Then maybe we should continue our great-grandmother's work, in a modern way, but continue it. Jennifer felt a wave of pride and relief. Her daughter had understood the importance of that legacy without her having to force it. On Monday, as they researched contemporary ways to help vulnerable women, they got an unexpected visit. Brian showed up with 2 men in suits. Jennifer, these are Mr. Albert and Mr. Frank from New Dawn Construction. They've come with an offer for the house. I already said I don't want to sell. Albert, a short, bald man, pulled a folder from his briefcase. Ms. Jennifer, our company is interested in building a residential complex on this block. We can offer well above market value. I'm not interested. Frank, taller and wearing sunglasses, stepped forward with a forced smile. Won't you even hear the offer? We're talking about $300,000. Jennifer knew the house was worth $100,000 at most in its current state. The offer was suspicious. Why the specific interest in this house? Well, Albert hesitated. We need the whole lot for the project. This is the last property left. And if I don't sell? Frank's smile vanished. That would be a shame. Isolated properties in the middle of construction sites have problems, noise, dust, access issues. You might end up being forced to move anyway. The veiled threat made Jennifer furious, but she stayed calm. I'll think about the offer. After the men left, Brian stayed behind. Jennifer, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Take it before they change their minds. Brian, why are you so set on me selling this house? Because I need the money, he exploded. I owe 200 grand to some dangerous people. They know the house is family property and have been hounding me for months. The truth finally came out. Brian had promised the house as collateral to loan sharks, assuming he'd inherit a share when their grandmother died. With everything going to Jennifer, he was desperate. That's not my problem, Brian. Yes, it is. We're family. Margaret always said family helps each other, like you all helped her when she was alone. Brian had no reply. He left muttering threats about contesting the will. That afternoon, Dorothy brought troubling news. Jennifer, be careful with this construction company. I spoke to other neighbors, and they've been buying houses for low prices, using threats. Some families moved out of fear. But they offered me $300,000. Because they know you're the key to everything. Without this house, their project won't happen. They must be desperate. What should I do? Your grandmother would say, fight. She never gave up when the powerful tried to silence her. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now, continuing. On Tuesday, Jennifer and Emma decided to dig deeper into the construction company. They discovered New Dawn Construction had been fined multiple times for shady practices, including building without permits and using substandard materials. Mom, look at this, said Emma, pointing at the computer screen. They built a condo in Williamsburg that had to be demolished because the structure was unsafe. And they still get new projects? Apparently, yes. There must be some scheme behind it. On Wednesday, they returned to the atelier to keep organizing the dresses. That's when Jennifer noticed something odd. One of the mannequins was missing its label with the name and date. Dorothy, what dress is this? She asked, pointing to a nearly finished white lace design. That. Dorothy hesitated. That's your mother's dress. Jennifer felt her blood run cold. My mother? Yes. She was going to marry an older man at 18. Margaret tried to warn her about him, but your mother wouldn't listen. The wedding happened. And what happened to my father? Barbara endured 2 years of marriage before finding out her husband had other women all over the city. When you were born, she went back to her mother's house asking for help. But she always said my father left because of Grandma, that she kicked him out of the family. That's a lie. Margaret took you both in without questions. She cared for you while Barbara worked. But your mother never forgave Margaret for trying to stop the wedding. She was ashamed she'd been warned and hadn't listened. Jennifer stepped closer to her mother's dress. It was beautiful, but now she noticed the deliberately unfinished details, a sleeve with an open seam, the hem marked but not cut. My grandmother tried to save my mother too. She tried, but she didn't always succeed. When she failed, it hurt her deeply. Barbara was one of the failures that pained Margaret the most. That's why my mother never spoke well of Grandma. Exactly. It was easier to blame Margaret than admit she'd ignored wise advice. That night, Jennifer decided to call her mother, who'd lived in Miami for 15 years. Mom, I need to talk to you about Grandma Margaret. That woman? Jennifer wasn't taking the house enough? Now you want to dig up the past? I've learned some important things. I don't care. Margaret was always meddlesome and troublemaking. She tried to help you, Mom. She tried to stop you from marrying Dad because she knew he'd hurt you. Silence on the other end. Who told you that? Dorothy, and I found your wedding dress in the atelier Grandma kept in the basement. What atelier? Jennifer shared everything she'd discovered, the unfinished dresses, the thank you letters, the women's support network. That's ridiculous, said Barbara, but her voice trembled. It's true, Mom. Grandma spent her whole life saving women from bad marriages. She tried to save you, too. Stop it, Jennifer. Mom, she loved you. She kept your dress until the end, hoping one day you'd understand. Barbara began to cry on the other end of the line. You don't understand how hard it was. I was young. I was in love. When she said Anthony was no good, I thought it was spite, jealousy over seeing me happy. And when you found out she was right, I wanted to die of shame. How could I go back and tell her she was right? How could I admit I'd been a fool? She never judged you, Mom. Dorothy said Grandma was happy when you came back with my baby. She just wanted to protect you. Barbara's crying grew more intense. Jennifer, I was a terrible daughter. I abandoned my mother when she needed me most. I was too proud and I left that woman alone for 20 years. It's never too late to make amends. Yes, it is. She's gone. But you can honor her memory. You can help me continue the work she was doing. How? Come to New York City. Visit the atelier, see what your mother built. Barbara promised to think about it, but Jennifer knew convincing her would be hard. Pride still spoke louder than love. On Thursday, the situation with the construction company got worse. Jennifer arrived home to find workers setting up equipment on the neighboring lot. The noise was deafening, and dust invaded every room. Frank showed up with a smug smile. "How are things over here? Pretty loud, huh? Must be tough living under these conditions. You don't have permission to work on weekends. We have emergency permits. So, have you thought about our offer?" "I'm not selling." "That's too bad. The noise is going to get much worse in the coming months." It was clearly a scheme to pressure her into selling. Jennifer decided to seek legal help, but the lawyers she consulted were discouraging. New Dawn Construction had valid permits and wasn't technically breaking any laws. On Saturday, while trying to clean the dust invading the atelier, Jennifer found a folder hidden behind the chest. Inside were documents that changed everything: the original deeds to the house and the neighboring lot. Her grandmother had owned not just the property they lived on, but also the adjacent lot, which she'd bought in the 80s. The construction company was working on land that wasn't theirs. "Dorothy!" Jennifer shouted, running to show her the documents. "Look at this!" The neighbor examined the papers carefully. Margaret bought this lot when the neighbor died, said it was to protect the house from future construction. But why didn't anyone know? She registered it under a company she created, called it Rose Atelier. See here on the document. Jennifer read the company name, listed as the legal owner of the land. Her grandmother had been smarter than anyone realized. On Monday, Jennifer confronted Frank with the documents in hand. "We need to talk." "Of course. Decided to accept our offer?" "Actually, I came to inform you that you're building on private property without authorization." Frank paled when he saw the deeds. "This must be some mistake. We checked all the paperwork." "There's no mistake. My grandmother owned this lot since 1987. You're trespassing on private property." "That's impossible. We bought it from a real estate agency. We have contracts." "Then you were deceived. This land has belonged to the Miller family for 40 years. Frank grabbed his phone and made several frantic calls. Albert showed up half an hour later, sweating and gesturing wildly. "There must be some misunderstanding. Our company would never build on someone else's land." "The misunderstanding is yours. I want all construction stopped immediately and all equipment removed. This will take a few days to sort out. You have 24 hours. After that, I'm taking legal action for trespassing and property damage." The businessmen left arguing, clearly desperate. Jennifer had turned the tables using her grandmother's own cleverness. By Tuesday, the equipment was gone. Brian showed up furious. "Jennifer, you ruined everything. Those men were my only chance to pay off the debts." "Your problem, Brian. You promised something that wasn't yours." "But we're family. Margaret would have helped me." "Grandma helped those who deserved it. You abandoned her when she was alive. Now you want to take advantage of her inheritance." Brian lunged at Jennifer, but Emma stepped between them. "Get out of here!" the teenager shouted. "Don't ever come back." "Your family will pay for this," Brian threatened before leaving. That afternoon, Dorothy brought a revelation that explained a lot. "Jennifer, I think you should know the truth about Brian." "What about him?" "Years ago, he went to Margaret asking for a loan. She found out he was gambling on illegal games and refused to help. Ever since, he's been spreading vicious rumors about her to the rest of the family." "What kind of rumors?" "That she practiced strange rituals, that she had men over in the middle of the night, that she was losing her mind. All lies to discredit her and get the inheritance." That's why the relatives were afraid of the house. Exactly. Brian planted all those ideas in their heads. Margaret knew, but chose not to defend herself. She said the truth always comes out in the end. Jennifer began to understand the extent of Brian's manipulation. He had isolated her grandmother so he could inherit everything, never imagining she'd leave the house specifically to her granddaughter. On Wednesday, she got an unexpected call. It was Deborah Williams, the woman from the first dress she'd found in the atelier. "Miss Miller, it's Deborah. Dorothy told me you discovered Mrs. Miller's atelier." "Deborah?" I read your thank you letter. How are you? I'm well, thanks to your grandmother. I'm 65 now, a business owner, with children and grandchildren, all because she gave me the courage to leave that terrible marriage. I'd love to meet you in person. Me too. And I've brought other women who'd like to thank Mrs. Miller's family face to face. On Saturday, the atelier welcomed 15 women of different ages. All had been helped by Margaret over the years. Deborah brought Susan, now a doctor. Susan introduced Rachel, who'd become a teacher. Rachel came with Ashley, who ran a women's shelter. Each shared her story, and Jennifer realized her grandmother had built far more than an escape plan. She'd created a support network that had lasted decades. Mrs. Miller saved our lives, Deborah said. Now we want to give back. We heard you're thinking of continuing her work. I'm still deciding. We can help. We have experience, connections, resources. Together, we can do so much more than your grandmother could alone. Ashley approached Jennifer. My shelter has its own space, but I've been looking for a more private place for consultations. This atelier would be perfect. How so? Many women are afraid to seek help at official centers. Here, they could come for sewing lessons and get discreet guidance on their rights, job options, safe housing. Jennifer looked at Emma, who smiled and nodded. Do you think this would work today? It'd work even better, Rachel replied. Now we have stricter laws, government programs, social networks. We could achieve in months what your grandmother took years to do. Deborah opened a folder of documents. We've already researched how to formalize everything. We can start a non-profit, get city support, partner with businesses. The atelier would be the base, but the work would spread across the whole city. That night, Jennifer talked at length with Emma about the proposal. What do you think, sweetheart? I think great-grandma would be proud. She helped these women one by one. Now they want to help hundreds. But it would be a big responsibility. We'd have to dedicate ourselves fully to it. Mom, you said each generation chooses whether to continue the work. I choose to continue. What about you? Jennifer hugged her daughter, moved. I choose to continue too. On Sunday, they held an official meeting at the atelier. Present were Jennifer, Emma, Dorothy, and 7 of the women who had been helped by Margaret. Together, they created the Margaret Miller Foundation, Women's Support and Protection. Deborah would serve as president. Susan would oversee medical care. Rachel would organize educational programs, and Ashley would connect with other NGOs. Jennifer would be the general coordinator, and Emma would handle digital communications. What will our first project be? Emma asked. We'll modernize the atelier, Deborah replied. Computers, phones, a small library with books on women's rights. And of course, we'll keep the sewing machines. Many women need a trade to support themselves. What about Grandma's dresses? We'll preserve them in a special room, Jennifer said. They tell the story of all this. Every visitor should understand where our inspiration came from. The following Monday, Barbara unexpectedly appeared at the house door. Mom! Jennifer rushed to hug her. I came to see my mother's atelier, Barbara said, tears in her eyes. They went down to the basement together. Barbara walked silently among the dresses, gently touching each fabric. When she reached her own dress, she broke down in tears. She kept it. After everything I did, she kept my dress. Because she loved you, Mom. Jennifer, I was a fool. I wasted 20 years fighting a woman who only wanted to protect me. What matters is, you're here now. Barbara read some of the thank you letters and met the women organizing the foundation. At the end of the day, she made an announcement. I want to move back to New York City. I want to help you with this project. Are you sure, Mom? Margaret dedicated 40 years of her life to saving women. The least I can do is dedicate the years I have left to continuing her work. In the following months, the house in Greenwich Village was completely transformed. The first floor became a cozy reception area where women could speak privately with trained volunteers. The second floor housed a small library and rooms for vocational courses. The basement atelier was modernized but kept its original essence. The historic dresses were displayed behind a glass wall, accompanied by a text explaining Margaret Miller's story and mission. Dorothy became the official keeper of the memory, welcoming visitors and sharing the stories behind each dress. At 75, she had found a new purpose in life, Emma created a website and social media profiles that quickly gained followers. Women from all over the city began seeking help, and many volunteered. Brian tried to contest the will, but lawyers uncovered his debts and history of family manipulation. The case was dismissed without trial. New Dawn Construction was investigated and shut down for irregularities. Frank and Albert were prosecuted for attempted real estate fraud. 6 months after the discovery of the atelier, the Margaret Miller Foundation had already helped over 100 women. Some found jobs through vocational training, others gained the strength to leave abusive relationships, and many realized they weren't alone in their struggles. One Saturday afternoon, while organizing the schedule for the following week, Jennifer found an envelope she hadn't seen before, hidden at the back of the sewing table drawer. Inside was a final letter from her grandmother. "My dearest Jennifer, if you've made it this far, it means you've understood everything and chosen to continue. I don't know how many women I've been able to help in my lifetime, but I know each one was worth it. What makes me proudest isn't the dresses I never finished, but the lives I helped restart. Now this mission is yours. Turn this solitary work into something greater. Build a network, organize other women, multiply our strength. Your grandfather Robert always said one person can save another, but a group can change the world. Make this atelier the starting point for something I could never have imagined. Thank you for honoring our memory. Your grandmother who loves you forever, Margaret." Jennifer called Emma and Barbara to read the letter together. The three of them cried, embracing in the middle of the atelier, surrounded by dresses that represented decades of courage and compassion. "I think Grandma would approve of what we're doing," said Emma. "Approve and be proud," Barbara added. "I finally understand why she kept my dress. It wasn't to remind me of the mistake I made, but to show me there's always a second chance." That night, the three women from 3 different generations sat in the living room to plan the future of the foundation. They had ideas to expand their work, partner with schools and hospitals, and train more volunteers. "You know what?" Jennifer said, looking out the window at the street where she grew up. "When everyone refused this inheritance, they thought they were leaving me with a problem. But really, they gave me the greatest gift of my life." "What was it?" Emma asked. "The chance to discover who we really are, to honor our history, and to make a difference in other people's lives." Barbara smiled. "Margaret always said the best inheritances aren't the ones we leave behind, but the ones we choose to carry on. And we will carry it on," Emma declared. "Every woman we help will be a victory for our great-grandmother. Every life we change will be a dress she finally got to finish." A year later, the Margaret Miller Foundation had become a national model for women's support. The atelier in Greenwich Village welcomed delegations from other cities, eager to replicate their approach. Deborah was named Woman of the Year for her leadership in the organization. Susan opened a medical clinic specializing in care for domestic violence survivors. Rachel developed an educational program adopted by the Department of Education. Jennifer became a speaker, sharing her grandmother's story at universities and corporate events. At 18, Emma decided to study social work to specialize in women's services. Barbara, at 68, discovered a late passion for sewing and began teaching classes at the atelier, helping underprivileged women make clothes as a source of independent income. Dorothy, despite her advanced age, remained the guardian of memory, welcoming researchers interested in the history of women's protection in the United States. On the main wall of the atelier, a golden plaque bore the phrase that became the foundation's motto: "Some sew clothes, others sew destinies. Margaret Miller sewed hope." On a spring morning, exactly 2 years after discovering the atelier, Jennifer was organizing the dresses when she heard voices upstairs. She went up and found a young woman around 20 talking with Emma. "Mom, this is Amanda. She came looking for help." Amanda's eyes were red from crying, and she clutched a photo of a wedding dress. "My fiancé. He hits me when he drinks. But my family's already spent so much on the wedding. I don't know what to do." Jennifer stepped closer with kindness. "Let's talk this through. You're not alone." As she led Amanda to the atelier to show her the historic dresses and tell the story of each woman who'd found the courage to start over, Jennifer felt the comforting presence of her grandmother. Margaret had planted a seed 40 years ago. Now that seed had grown into a mighty tree, offering shade and protection to hundreds of women. Amanda listened carefully to every story, every tale of overcoming. When Jennifer finished, the young woman wiped her tears and said, "Can I stay with you for a few days? I need to think, to decide what to do." "You can stay as long as you need," Jennifer replied, "and when you're ready, we'll help you find your own path." As Amanda examined the unfinished dresses, Emma whispered in her mother's ear, "I think great-grandma is smiling right now." "She certainly is," Jennifer agreed. "And do you know why? Because she finally got to finish all the dresses. Every woman we help is a dress she completed through us." By the end of that afternoon, when Amanda decided to call off the wedding and accept the foundation's help to start over in another city, Jennifer went up to the atelier and spent a few minutes alone among the dresses. "Thank you, Grandma," she said softly. "Thank you for teaching us that some legacies are worth more than gold. And thank you for trusting me to carry on your work." The gentle breeze coming through the basement window seemed to whisper back, "Thank you for understanding that true love is the kind that sets free, not the kind that traps." The end. Now tell us what you thought of this touching story about courage, family, and the strength of women coming together to help other women. Do you know a similar story in your own family? Share your honest thoughts with us in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other heartwarming stories. Thank you so much for being here with us.